In this video, you will learn how to add on a number line. So a number line, remember, is something like this, where you have a line and then numbers on the line. So we have 0, which is called the origin, and then your negative numbers are on the left and your positive numbers are on the right. So if you were told to find the sum of -3 and -5, recall that the word sum means to add. So I am adding -3 and -5. So what I do is I start at -3, and when I add -5, that means I go 5 in the negative direction, which would be to the left. So I start here at -3, go 5 to the left, and that takes me over here to -8. So my solution would be -8. And you can also write this, instead of -3 plus -5, you can write as -3 minus 5. So that is the same thing. Next we have the sum of -3 and +5. So here we start at -3 again, and when we add the positive number, we're going to go to the right. So we start at -3, go to the right 5, which takes me to 2. So -3 plus 5 would equal 2. Now if you were to add +3 with -5, what you would do is you start at the 3 and you add -5, which means you're going to the left, which is the negative direction. So start at 3, go 5 to the left, and that takes me over here to -2. So 3 plus -5 would equal -2. So the rule is, if you are adding two numbers and the signs are different, and you're trying to calculate this in your head without the number line, what we do is we take the two numbers, just look at the absolute value of them, so we ignore the signs, positive and negative. We just look at the 5 and the 3, and we subtract. So if the signs are different, where one's positive, one's negative, we subtract the values. 5 minus 3 is 2, and then we need to determine the sign. Is it positive or negative? Well, we take a look at which numbers we have and which one is bigger. So which is bigger, 3 or 5? Well, 5 is bigger, and so that means we're going to take the sign that goes with the 5. The 5 is negative, so my answer would be a negative. So my final answer is a -2. All right, if the signs are the same, you simply add the numbers together. So sum of 3 and 5, you add 3 plus 5. If it was -3 plus a -5, you add 3 plus 5 to get 8, and your final answer would be a -8 because you had negative numbers to begin with. Here we have -3 plus 0, which I think we all know would be -3. And then 0 plus -3 would still be -3. Because when we add 0 to anything, it doesn't change the initial value. So when we add 0, the sum is identical to that number. So we're not changing the identity of the original number. Okay, it's staying the same. So because it's not changing the identity of the original number, when I add 0, we call 0 the identity element for addition. And then we have what's called the identity property of addition. And here in math notation, it says that there is a unique real number 0, such that for every real number a plus 0 equals a, and 0 plus a equals a. So all that means is simply that the identity element for addition exists. That's the identity property. It says that the identity element for addition exists, which is the number 0. Next we have the concept of opposites. So for addition, the opposite of a number would be just simply changing the sign. So the opposite of 3 would be -3. The opposite of -8 would be a +8. So what happens when you add two opposites together? So 4 and -4. if we add those together, our answer is going to be 0. And then the other way around, if we do -4 first and then add that with +4, that would still equal 0. So a number and its opposite are called additive inverses of each other. So like 4 and -4, those are called additive inverses. All right, so same thing as opposite, but for addition, it's going to be the additive inverse. All right, and it's because their sum is going to equal 0. Now we have what's called the inverse property, which in math notation says for every real number a, there is a unique real number -a, such that when I add them together, a plus -a, that will equal 0. And the other way around, -a plus the +a would also equal 0. So in other words, the inverse property says that every real number has an additive inverse. All right, so if you have the number 4, the inverse property says that there exists an additive inverse, which we know it would be -4. All right, let's get some practice with different types of questions that we've talked about in this video. First, we have -7 plus -4. All right, so you're adding the two numbers together, and we could use the number line, which would take longer, but it's fine if we do. We start with -7 plus -4. If you don't use the number line, we notice the signs are the same. They're both negative. So what that means when I try to add them together is that I just look at the 7 and 4, add those together to get 11, and then I keep the sign that we began with. They're both negative, so this would be a -11. Here we have 12 plus -3. Well, 12 plus -3 is the same thing as 12 minus 3, which would equal 9. If we didn't see that, we would see that the signs are different. We have a +12 and a -3. So when I add them together, I need to subtract the two numbers, 12 and then -3, to get 9. And the sign of my number is going to look at the bigger of the two. So 12 is bigger than 3, 12 is positive, so my answer is a +9. And then lastly, we have -4 plus -9, or -19, and then add that with 7. So we begin within the parentheses, within the brackets here. So the -4 plus -19, we'll do that first. So we have two negatives being added together. So when I add two negatives together, the signs are the same. So I add the 4 and 19 to get 23, and then I keep the sign, which was negative, so it's going to be a -23. So I have -23 plus 7. Now to add these together, the signs are different. We have a -23 and we have a +7 over here. So to add these together, I actually subtract the 23 by 7, which is 16, and then keep the sign of the bigger number. So 23 is bigger than 7, and 23 is negative, so my answer is going to be a -16.